Just I don't give a SHT. The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly, delivered with a casual cruelty that felt like a physical blow. My daughter, the girl I had raised, sacrificed for, and loved unconditionally, had uttered them. In that moment, something inside me shifted irrevocably. A heavy, suffocating cloak of duty and misplaced loyalty began to fray at the edges, revealing a core of cold, hard necessity. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I could no longer pretend. I could no longer keep giving, keep helping, keep sacrificing for people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle or a resource to be drained dry. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. My name is Eleanor, and I had reached a precipice. For years, my life had been defined by taking care of others. First my husband, Michael, through a long illness, and then, after his passing, my daughter, Sarah, and her husband, Mark. I thought that's what mothers did, what good people did. But what I discovered next would force me to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. My husband, Michael, had passed away 2 years prior, leaving me with a comfortable, though not extravagant, life. Our home was modest, but fully paid for, a small nest egg in savings and investments, enough for me to live out my retirement years without worry, provided I was prudent. I was in my late 60s, healthy and ready for a quiet chapter of life after years of caregiving. My daughter, Sarah, was in her early 40s, married to Mark. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I adored. Sarah and Mark seemed to constantly struggle financially, despite both holding decent jobs. Over the years, I had helped them countless times, a down payment on their first small house, which they later sold, the money seemingly vanishing, help with car repairs, school expenses for the grandchildren, emergency loans that were rarely, if ever, repaid. It was my nature to help, to support my family. I believed in them, in their potential, and I wanted my grandchildren to have everything they needed. I saw my assets not just as mine, but as a future buffer for my family, a legacy. This trust, this open hand, was, I now understand, seen not as generosity, but as a weakness to be exploited. Sarah and Mark's requests had grown more frequent, more demanding. There was an underlying tone of expectation, as if my savings and my home were rightfully theirs. They spoke often of the inheritance, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with an unsettling seriousness, even though I was still very much alive and healthy. They seemed to view my continued existence more as a delay in their financial plans than a gift of time together. One evening, Sarah and Mark were visiting, having dinner. I had gone to the kitchen to get dessert, leaving them talking in the living room. The house was quiet, and their voices carried. I heard Mark sigh, frustrated. "We need that money, Sarah. The landlord is threatening eviction." Sarah's voice was sharp. "I know. What do you want me to do?" She's still, hear the way she said "here" sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just presence, but an impediment. Mark lowered his voice, but I could still hear. Maybe we should just suggest she downsizes? Or, maybe it's time we talk about power of attorney. She's getting older, after all. Who's going to handle things if something happens? Then, Sarah's response, delivered with a chilling lack of emotion, the words that would forever be etched into my memory. Just I don't give a SHT. The dessert bowl slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. They jumped, startled, and Sarah called out, "Mom? Everything okay?" I stood frozen for a moment, the sound of the breaking ceramic a dull counterpoint to the splintering of my heart. I managed to choke out, "Fine, just dropped something," my voice trembling. I cleaned up the mess mechanically, my mind reeling. They hadn't meant for me to hear. The casual brutality of Sarah's words, the implication that my death was merely a financial convenience, was devastating. This wasn't about needing help. This was about entitlement so profound it erased my humanity. I went back into the living room, forcing a smile, pretending I hadn't heard. But the laughter, the easy conversation that followed, felt like a performance, and I saw them with new, terrible clarity. They were circling, waiting. That night, sleep offered no escape. The words replayed endlessly. It wasn't just cruel, it was dehumanizing. It revealed the true nature of their regard for me. I was not a mother, not a person, but an asset they were impatient to acquire. My initial reaction was a deep, gut-wrenching hurt, followed by a wave of nausea. How could my own daughter feel this way? Had I done something wrong? Had I raised her to be so cold, so mercenary? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just venting frustration. Maybe she didn't mean it literally. But the context, Mark's suggestion about power of attorney, her response about me still being here, stripped away any innocent interpretation. This was calculated impatience, a desire to bypass the natural order of life and death for financial gain. The next morning, I went through the motions of my usual routine, but my mind was racing. I felt a growing unease, a vulnerability I hadn't recognized before. My home, my finances, they were suddenly under threat, not from strangers, but from within my own family. The first defensive action I took was small, almost symbolic. I retrieved a box of old financial statements from the attic and gathered all my important documents, the deed to the house, investment statements, my will. I put them in a secure, fireproof box in my closet. Then I went to my computer and changed all my online banking passwords to something complex and unrelated to any family dates or names. It felt like locking the barn door, a necessary first step before the horses bolted. The days that followed were tense, though Sarah and Mark seemed oblivious that anything had changed. They continued with their subtle hints and not-so-subtle requests for money. The pressure escalated. Sarah called, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mom, you know that business idea Mark had? It's really taking off, but he just needs a little capital to get it started properly. Like 50,000? It would be an investment, of course. You'd get it back with interest." $50,000. It was a significant portion of my savings. An investment? I had never seen a return on any money I had invested in their various schemes. When I hesitated, saying I needed to think about it, the sweetness vanished. "Oh, come on, Mom. What do you need all that money for anyway? You're just sitting on it. Don't you want to help us? Help your grandchildren?" The guilt trip had begun. I started documenting everything. I saved every text message, recorded phone calls after checking that it was legal in my state to record conversations I was a party to, and wrote detailed notes in a small journal about every conversation, every request, every veiled threat. I felt like a spy in my own life, gathering evidence against an enemy I never thought I would have, my own flesh and blood. The sheer audacity of their demands, coupled with the memory of Sarah's cruel words, solidified my resolve. I knew I needed professional help. I made an appointment with a lawyer specializing in elder law and estate planning, recommended by a trusted friend. Ms. Evelyn Reed was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s. I laid out everything, my financial situation, my history of helping Sarah and Mark, the overheard conversation, the escalating requests, the hints about power of attorney and challenging my capacity. Ms. Reed listened patiently, taking copious notes. When I finished, she leaned forward, her expression serious. "Eleanor, what you're describing is classic financial elder abuse, potentially coupled with undue influence and even threats. They see you as a cash cow and they're getting impatient. The fact that they're discussing you dying for financial gain and talking about power of attorney under these circumstances is extremely concerning. Your immediate priority is to protect your assets and your legal autonomy." She outlined my options. We could update my will and establish a trust to protect my assets from being immediately accessible upon my death. We could put legal blocks on accessing my property or accounts. If threats or harassment continued, we could pursue cease and desist letters and even restraining orders. She stressed the importance of continuing to gather evidence, quietly and methodically. Do not confront them yet, she advised. Do not let them know you're onto them or that you're speaking with a lawyer. The element of surprise is your greatest asset right now. Let them continue to reveal their intentions while you build your case. Armed with legal advice, my strategic preparation intensified. I worked with Ms. Reed to draft a new will, placing my assets into a carefully constructed trust managed by an impartial third party upon my death, with specific conditions for distribution to my grandchildren only when they reached a responsible age, bypassing Sarah and Mark entirely. We also explored options for placing my house into a trust, making it much harder for anyone to force a sale or use it as collateral. I consulted with a financial advisor who helped me secure my accounts, adding extra layers of verification for any transactions. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark's pressure intensified. When the large sum of $50,000 didn't materialize, they resorted to more desperate tactics. Fake emergencies became their go-to strategy. There was the sudden, urgent need for a new roof on their rented house. If we don't pay the landlord now, we'll be homeless. Then, a medical scare involving one of the grandchildren that supposedly required immediate specialist consultation costs not covered by insurance. I quietly verified these claims where possible, finding inconsistencies or outright lies. The roof emergency vanished when I asked for the landlord's contact information. The medical scare seemed to resolve itself the moment I mentioned needing documentation from the hospital. Their attempts were clumsy, transparent to anyone not blinded by love or obligation. But they were also relentless, wearing down my patience. A crucial confrontation occurred when Mark called, his voice tight with frustration. Eleanor, we need to talk about your will. Sarah is your only daughter. It's only right that she inherits everything. We need to make sure things are simple and straightforward. Maybe we should look into a joint bank account, just to make things easier, for bills and things. This was it. The explicit push for direct access. I drew a deep breath, remembering Ms. Reed's advice to stay calm and measured. Mark, I said, my voice steady, my finances and my will are private matters that I have under control. If I need help managing things, I have advisors for that. Thank you for your concern, but it's not necessary. Mark's tone shifted instantly, becoming cold and hard. Not necessary? What do you mean, not necessary? You're getting old, Eleanor. You're not as sharp as you used to be. We're just trying to help you. Don't make this difficult. It's not difficult, Mark, I replied, my voice gaining strength. I said no. My affairs are in order. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken threat. Fine, he snapped. Have it your way. But don't come crying to us when you mess things up. That conversation was a turning point. It removed any lingering doubt. This wasn't about help, it was about control and entitlement. My resolve hardened completely. I wasn't just protecting my assets anymore. I was protecting my dignity and my right to live my remaining years in peace, free from their predatory behavior. The smoking gun arrived subtly. I had installed a small security camera by my front door after a few suspicious incidents, a package disappearing, a gate left ajar. One afternoon, the camera captured Mark letting himself in with a key I didn't know he had while I was out running errands. He went straight to my study, where I kept a file cabinet. The camera didn't cover the study, but the timeline showed he was inside for about 20 minutes. Later that day, I checked the file cabinet. The lock, a simple one, looked slightly forced. My original will was there, but tucked behind it, I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a power of attorney form, pre-filled with my name, ready for a signature and, disturbingly, an assessment form from a doctor I didn't know, with questions about my cognitive abilities. They were clearly laying the groundwork to potentially challenge my capacity and gain control through legal means if I didn't comply. This wasn't just about money, it was about control over me. I took the documents directly to Ms. Reed. Her expression darkened as she examined them. This, she said, tapping the power of attorney form, combined with the recording of Mark implying you aren't sharp, and the overheard conversation, provides strong evidence of their intent. They weren't just hoping for inheritance, They were actively planning to seize control of your assets while you're alive, likely under the guise of helping you because of declining capacity. This moves beyond simple greed into potential criminal territory. Attempted fraud, possibly even attempted theft by deception. With this definitive proof, we had the legal weapon we needed. Ms. Reed immediately drafted several documents, a formal cease and desist letter demanding they stop all financial requests and stop attempting to access my property or files, a notice of intent to file a complaint with Adult Protective Services regarding potential financial abuse and exploitation, and the paperwork to file for a restraining order against Mark based on his implied threats and unauthorized entry, and against Sarah based on her complicity and emotional abuse. We also completed the legal work to place my home into a trust and finalized the changes to my investment accounts, making them virtually impenetrable without my explicit, in-person consent and verification. My counter-strategy was ready for implementation. For weeks, I had lived a double life, the seemingly oblivious mother and grandmother, while quietly building an ironclad case. Sarah and Mark, sensing my continued refusal to hand over money and likely unaware of the extent of my preparations, grew increasingly overconfident. They likely interpreted my quietness as passive resistance that would eventually break, or perhaps even confirmation of their false narrative that I was becoming confused and unable to manage my affairs. They made crucial mistakes: the unauthorized entry, the documented attempts at creating fake emergencies, the clear intent revealed in conversation and documentation. They believed they had the upper hand, that I was an easy target. The climax arrived swiftly and without fanfare, just as Ms. Reed had orchestrated. On a Tuesday morning, a process server delivered the legal documents to Sarah and Mark at their home, and also at their workplaces, as Ms. Reed advised, to make it clear this was serious and public. The packet contained the cease and desist letter, the notification to Adult Protective Services, and the preliminary filing for the restraining orders. I was at home when the calls started. My phone rang incessantly. Sarah first, her voice initially shocked, then quickly turning to rage. "What is this? What did you do? You filed a restraining order. Are you insane?" I remained calm, remembering Ms. Reed's instruction: brief, factual, and direct all communication to the lawyer. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "all communication regarding these matters must go through my attorney, Ms. Evelyn Reed. Her contact information is in the documents you received." "Your attorney? You actually got a lawyer? You selfish, ungrateful old woman. After everything we've done for you," her voice dissolved into furious accusations, threats, and then, abruptly, cut off. Then Mark called, alternating between bluster and panic. "Eleanor, what the hell is going on? You can't do this. This is crazy. We're family. You're ruining us." He too quickly turned to threats, implying I would regret this, that he would expose me, that no one would believe me over them. I repeated the same line about my attorney. Their shock and panic were palpable. They had expected me to fold under pressure, to cave to guilt. They had never anticipated that I would quietly gather evidence and deploy legal action. The truth, at least the legal truth of their actions, was now laid bare in formal documents. While not revealed to the entire community, the nature of the filings, financial abuse, restraining orders, meant that relevant parties, employers, landlords, potentially extended family if the APS investigation proceeded, would become aware of the situation. In their desperation, the tactics shifted again. The calls became a mix of furious insults and tearful begging. Sarah left voicemails pleading, "Mom, please. We're so sorry. It was a mistake. We didn't mean it. We love you. Don't do this. Think about the grandchildren." It was a final, desperate attempt to use emotional blackmail to pull me back into the cycle of guilt and obligation. But the casual cruelty of justice and the calculated plan to take control of my life and assets had broken the spell forever. I did not respond. My lawyer handled all inquiries. The immediate aftermath was quiet. I sat in my living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, the house silent except for the ticking clock. There were no more frantic calls, just the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of birds. It was a peace I hadn't felt in a long time, a peace that came from reclaiming my life and setting clear boundaries. The legal victory was swift and definitive. The court granted the restraining orders, preventing Sarah and Mark from coming to my home or workplace, and requiring all future contact to be through Ms. Reed. The filing with Adult Protective Services triggered an investigation, which, combined with the evidence we provided, resulted in findings that supported my claims of financial exploitation and undue influence. This had consequences for Sarah and Mark, although I didn't dwell on the specifics. They faced restrictions and scrutiny that would make it difficult for them to repeat their patterns with others or to access any form of financial assistance. My assets were secure in the trust, untouchable by them. My new boundaries were firm, built on the foundation of legal protection and a fierce, newfound self-respect. My door was locked, my financial life private and secure. Communication, if any, was strictly mediated by my lawyer, primarily concerning the grandchildren, but even that was minimal and supervised. The family relationship, as I had known it, was permanently changed, perhaps irrevocably broken. There was no path back to the naive trust one had once held. But in that quiet house, surrounded by the things I had worked for, I felt a profound sense of inner peace. It wasn't the ending I would have wished for my family, but it was an ending where I had stood up for myself, protected what was mine, and refused to be a victim. My hard-won wisdom came with a heavy price, but it also brought a quiet strength. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.